10 years after my parents called me greedy, they stood on my front porch and asked me to save them. They did not come alone. My mother came crying. My father came with that hard family leader face. My Aunt Bernice stood behind them like a witness, and Pastor Lowell held his Bible against his chest like it was legal proof. They thought they were walking into the home of the same quiet daughter who always swallowed pain to keep the peace. But this was my house. My name was on the mortgage. My money had paid for every wall, and this time, when they asked me to open my life for them, I did not bend. My name is Meredith Claiborne. I am 38 years old, and this is the story of how my family stole my grandmother's inheritance, called me greedy for noticing, and came back 10 years later begging at the door they never helped me build. If you have ever been punished for asking for what was already yours, stay with me, because this one is for you. The whole wound started with my grandmother, Eleanor. She was the only person in my childhood who saw me clearly. She kept my school awards in a tin box, saved every card I made her, and told everyone that I had healing hands long before I became a nurse. She had worked hard her entire life, raised children, buried her husband, saved quietly, and never wasted a dollar. When she died, I was 28, exhausted from nursing school, buried under loans, and still believing my family would do the right thing when it mattered. At the lawyer's office, her will was read. Her house would be sold. Small belongings were named. Then came the line that changed my life. She left $180,000 for the education and future of my grandchildren. Grandchildren. Plural. I was sitting right there. I was her grandchild. I was in school. I thought, for one small second, that Grandma Eleanor had reached back from heaven to help me breathe. But my father, Howard, was named executor. And in my family, that meant king. A month later, at Sunday dinner, my sister Sienna smiled across the table while my mother, Lillian, announced that all of Grandma's money would go to Sienna's household. Sienna had 2 children, a husband with big dreams and no discipline, and bills she never seemed to understand. I sat there with my fork in my hand and asked one simple question. Grandma wrote grandchildren. Why am I not included? The room went cold. My mother looked at me like I had spit on the table. Then she said the sentence that followed me for 10 years. Don't be greedy, Meredith. That money belongs to the family. My father said Sienna had real responsibilities, real children, real needs. I was single. I was strong. I could manage. And just like that, my grandmother's gift was taken from me, wrapped in family language, and handed to my sister like I had never existed. I did not scream. I did not throw a plate. I went to a legal aid office and showed a lawyer the will. She told me my father had a duty to follow the document as written. She said giving the entire $180,000 to one household could be a serious breach. She also told me the truth. Fighting it would take years, cost money I did not have, and mean dragging my own father into court. When I told my parents I had spoken to a lawyer, my father's face turned to stone. He said, "Family takes care of family. We do not sue each other." That was rich coming from the man who had just taken care of everyone except me. So I made a decision. I stopped begging them to see me. I finished nursing school with loans, night shifts, cold coffee, aching feet, and a kind of stubbornness that felt like my grandmother's hand on my back. I moved 2 hours away. I built credit. I bought a small home. I became the kind of nurse people trusted during the worst night of their lives. And I kept a copy of that will in a folder, not because I wanted revenge, but because some wounds need paperwork. Years passed, and the truth did what truth always does. It waited. Sienna's husband, Dean, wasted the money on failed business plans, trucks, vacations, repairs, and investments that sounded smart only to fools. The $180,000 that was supposed to build futures disappeared. Then Sienna ran back to my parents. They co-signed loans. They drained savings. They borrowed against their home. My parents had called me greedy for asking for my share, then destroyed themselves trying to rescue the daughter who had received all of it. I did not celebrate, but I noticed. And then something unexpected happened. My niece, Harper, Sienna's oldest girl, started texting me. She thanked me for the birthday cards I had sent every year. She told me the house was always loud. She told me she wanted to study medicine one day, but did not think anyone could help her. That hurt me in a place my family had not reached in years. Harper was not guilty. She was a child. She was also exactly the kind of young mind my grandmother wanted protected. So I opened a college account for her, quietly. Month by month from my nurse's salary, I funded her education. When Harper was accepted into a good state program, I told her tuition was handled. She cried. I cried after we hung up. If this story is touching something in you, remember this. Real family is not always the people who demand sacrifice. Sometimes real family is the person who protects your future without making a show of it. Then came that Saturday. I opened my door and saw my parents, Aunt Bernice and Pastor Lowell. My mother was already crying. My father said they needed to talk as a family. Pastor Lowell spoke softly about forgiveness, honoring your parents, mercy, and hard times. Then my father explained the real reason they had come. They were losing the house. Retirement money was gone. The second mortgage had crushed them. They had talked it over, and the sensible solution was for my parents to move into my home while I helped pay down their debts. He said, I made good money now. He said, surely I had room. He said, surely family would not let family suffer. There was that word again, surely, as if my yes had already been signed before I entered the room. My mother reached for my hand, and for a second, the old daughter inside me almost answered, the daughter trained to rescue everyone, the daughter who believed love meant bleeding quietly. Then I looked at my living room, my walls, my life, and I knew I was not that girl anymore. I stood up and went to my office. In the filing cabinet was the folder, the will, the old legal notes, and one newer envelope with Harper's tuition receipts. I stood there longer than I needed to, because I will not lie to you. They were still my parents. My mother had once held me when I was sick. My father had once taught me how to count change at the kitchen table. But love does not erase theft. Blood does not erase betrayal. And forgiveness does not mean handing your home keys to the people who burned your inheritance and called the smoke your fault. So I carried the folder back to the living room and placed it on the coffee table. My father started talking again, already planning which room they would take, how my mother could help around the house, how I could cover payments until things improved. Aunt Bernice watched me closely. She knew I had not come back empty-handed. Pastor Lowell nodded like he was seeing a family healing. He was about to learn he had been invited to a robbery after-party. I asked my father calmly to explain to the pastor where Grandma Eleanor's $180,000 had gone. The room changed. My father said this was old history. My mother whispered that we should not dig up old pain. Pastor Lowell began to say something about resentment. I let him finish. Then I opened the folder and laid the will on the table. I pointed to the line and read it out loud. For the education and future of my grandchildren. I looked at the pastor and said, I was one of those grandchildren. I was in nursing school. Every dollar went to my sister. When I questioned it, they called me greedy. Pastor Lowell picked up the will and read it himself. His face changed first. That is when my father got loud. He said, Grandma would have wanted the money where the need was greatest. He said wording was not everything. He said family takes care of family. I waited until he was finished. Then I said very softly, You are right, Dad. Family does take care of family. That is exactly what I have been doing. I placed Harper's tuition receipts on top of the will, paid statements, account records, enrollment confirmation, 2 years of transfers from me to her future. My mother covered her mouth. Aunt Bernice whispered, Oh, Eleanor would be proud. My father stared at those papers like they had slapped him. I said we knew, when I found out nobody saved a dime for Harper, I started paying for her education myself. Not with Grandma's stolen money, with mine, because someone in this family needed to honor what that will actually said. That was when Sienna, who had come in during the argument, exploded. She asked why I hid it from her. She said I made her look bad. I told her the truth. I hid it because the moment you knew there was money, Harper's future would become your pride, your control, and your problem. I did not do this for you. I did it for her. My father then made his final mistake. He said if I had money for Harper, I had money for them. I looked at him and said, No, I have money for the grandchild everyone forgot. I do not have money for the people who stole from my grandmother, wasted it, and brought a pastor to guilt me into paying the bill. My mother broke then, not loudly, but honestly. She said she had always thought I was strong. She thought I did not need help. I told her, You decided I was strong so you would not have to ask if I was hurting. You used my survival as permission to give me nothing. She cried harder because the truth had finally found the exact door. I told them I would not take them in. I would not pay their debts. I would send them information for senior services, housing help, and debt counseling because I was not cruel. But my home, my savings, and my peace were not the family bank. Pastor Lowell apologized before leaving. My father walked out silent. Sienna slammed the door. My mother paused on the porch and said only, I understand. Maybe she did. Maybe she only understood consequences. Either way, the line had been drawn. My parents lost the house. They moved into a small apartment. My father still does not call. My mother calls sometimes, and we talk about weather and work. It is not close, but it is cleaner than before. Sienna and I do not speak. Harper is still in school, still chasing medicine, still sending me grades that make me cry in the break room, and every time I pay another bill for her future, I feel my grandmother near me, not because I got revenge by ruining anyone. I got revenge by refusing to become what they said I was. I was not greedy. I was the only one who remembered the will. I was the only one who protected a child's future. I was the only one who proved that generosity and boundaries can live in the same heart. So if anyone ever calls you selfish for wanting what was already yours, remember this: the record outlives the lie. And sometimes the hardest revenge is simply becoming strong enough to say, no, not this time. Commentary, discussion, explanation, and lessons. Let's look at this story from a deeper angle, because the real conflict was not the inheritance. The real conflict was control. Meredith's family wanted to decide who deserved help, who deserved sacrifice, and who had to stay quiet. They took one clear line from Grandma Eleanor's will and bent it until it served their favorite child. Then, when Meredith asked a fair question, they did something many unfair families do. They turned the victim into the problem. That word greedy was not random. It was a weapon. It was used to shame Meredith before she could defend herself. Her parents knew the will said grandchildren. They knew she was included. But if they admitted that, they would have to admit they were wrong. So they changed the story. Suddenly, Meredith was not a granddaughter asking for fairness. She was a selfish daughter disturbing family peace, and this is where the story becomes emotionally powerful. Meredith did not become reckless. She did not waste 10 years chasing revenge. She built herself. She became a nurse. She bought her own home. She created a life that did not depend on the people who had betrayed her. That kind of revenge is quiet, but it is strong. Sometimes the most powerful response is not shouting. Sometimes it is surviving so well that the people who underestimated you have to knock on your door one day. The porch scene is the turning point. Her parents did not come with honesty. They came with pressure. They brought Aunt Bernice and Pastor Lowell because they wanted witnesses on their side. They wanted Meredith to feel trapped by family, religion, guilt, and duty. But the problem was simple. They came asking for mercy without ever giving accountability. Then Meredith brought out the folder. That folder changed the room. It showed that she was not bitter. She was accurate. She was not greedy. She was documented. The will proved what Grandma Eleanor wanted. The tuition receipts proved who actually honored it. Her parents had taken $180,000 in the name of children's futures, but Meredith was the one paying for Harper's education from her own salary. That is the beautiful reversal. The daughter they called selfish became the only person acting with real family love. The parents who preached duty had failed the duty written in black and white. And when Meredith said no, it was not cruelty. It was wisdom. She helped the innocent child, but she refused to rescue the guilty adults. The lesson here is clear. Never confuse guilt with love. Love does not force you to destroy your peace to repair someone else's bad choices. Another lesson is that being strong does not mean you need nothing. Many families neglect the strongest person because they assume that person will always survive. But survival is not the same as support. This story also teaches us that boundaries are not revenge. Boundaries are the door between your healing and someone else's chaos. Meredith did not punish her parents. She simply stopped paying the price for their decisions. In the end, the real victory was not that her parents lost their house. The victory was that Meredith finally owned her truth. She honored her grandmother, she protected Harper, and she proved that generosity is powerful only when it comes with self-respect. The end?